Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Kirinor Floorgreen the 11th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to review I've been doing this the entire time I've been reading this damn book, Trail of the Black Wyrm by Chris Pierson. I will be spoiling this story, so if you don't want to know it, stop watching. I would like to take a moment and remind you that you can always pick up Dragonlance gaming materials using the affiliate link in the description below. It always goes to help this channel, so for those of you who have used it and abused it, appreciate you. There's actually a huge sale going on right now too, so that's always a bonus. All right, that being said, this is my perspective only. If you disagree with it, which is awesome, share your thoughts. Let me know why you think the way you do or you think I'm wrong. This is just one forum for us to sort of geek out about Dragonlance in some way. That's kind of what I'm going to do because I love this book. The Phoenix Liberty, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining live. Jason, how you doing? Thanks for joining live. I appreciate you. All right, so the way this works is I'm going to give you my pre-written review, which is basically a synopsis with a couple thoughts thrown in. And then I'm going to sort of talk about it, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. If you guys have any thoughts throughout the course of this review, by all means, throw them up in the chat room and I will get to them and we'll just sort of riff for a little while. It's hump day, right? Hey, Bryce, thanks for joining live. If you don't smash the like button, you are Gully Dwarf scum. It's a fact. Like, it's the thing. Deal with it. All right. All right, so the introduction. Oh, so for those of you who don't know, this is the second in the Taladas trilogy. Like 2 weeks ago, I reviewed the first book, and it's pretty dope. And this second one holds up. It's really, really great. Oh, the meeting sextet. Okay. I'm not sure that's the best 6 books to start with or to reread again because it's been a while since I've read them. But that's awesome. I think that's really great. I am Gully Dwarf scum, jokes on you. Oh, man. Okay. Well, we're going to get into some of this stuff, and I'm going to get into it right now. So let's start, right? So anyway, this is the second one in the trilogy, and it just literally picks up right where the last one left off. So Essana, Barreth Forlo's pregnant wife, was abducted with the statue of Maladar, the faceless one, at the end of the last novel. She is presented to the faceless ones, a group, and compelled with yaggol psionically. So the yaggol are like the slave controllers of this cult that is trying to bring Maladar out of the statue. So the ziggurat structures are part of the once great yaggol civilization, now in ruins. This is a point in the book where I was surprised. I've reread this, and so it's not new, but the yaggol were sort of extraplanar creatures that came to Krynn like early in like the Age of Dreams or even before that. And they sort of degenerated because they couldn't find their way back off the planet. And so they're not exactly like mind flayer status. They're sort of almost like Cthulhu-esque versions of mind flayers, which actually makes it a lot creepier and a lot cooler. So we're getting a whole lot of horror in this book with every interaction of the yaggol and how the yaggol interact not just with the prisoners, but how the greater world at large sees them. One thing that led me to sort of think twice on was the fact that the yaggol are this ancient civilization that was brought up in, sort of the pre-history of Krynn, and they have these massive ziggurats all around Taladas. But there's also another species I mentioned the last time I read the review for this book was the lizard species. No, I can't remember their name. Anyway, they were also an ancient civilization that the dragons actually helped them build up. So there must have been these two civilizations. This is before elves or humans ever made their way, or minotaurs ever made their way to Taladas. So there must have been this period of time when it was just lizard men and yaggol, mind flayer-esque beings, sort of building their civilizations and warring with each other, which is something I would love to read more about. Like, so if Wizard of the Coast, you ever want to explore like Taladas, please put it way back in the prehistory and give us some epic, like early civilization type stuff. because, I don't know, one person would like it. All right, anyway, this is where the faceless ones will attempt the ritual to pull Maladar's soul out of the statue and instill that soul into Essana's child. She's being taken care of by one of the faceless ones called the Keeper, who's a gentle and patient with her, or more so than any of the others are anyway. Essana is horrified about the situation, but she's literally helpless. She's assuming that her husband had died in battle because she has nothing to tell her otherwise. And it isn't until later that she realizes that there's a bit of contention between the faceless ones and that the Uigans were routed in the battle. She still doesn't know if Forlo is alive or not. This novel opens with a brutal first chapter as well. Barreth Forlo, Shadara the Moon Thief, and Hult the Uigan barbarian are planning on hunting down the statue of Maladar and Forlo's wife, when just outside of Cold Hope, Forlo's keep, they're attacked by tons of these Kender shadow creatures, and they're actually overrun by them. And the only reason why they survive is because out of nowhere, that elf that I was bitching about had no point in the first book, came in. His name is Eldaco, and he's basically a wilder elf, like a Kaganesty, but in Taladas. And he saved them from these shadow beasts. Anyway, he was the one that was hired by Chovuk Boila to attack and basically draw out the dissenters of his rise to power. So, hey, Michael, thanks for joining live. He escaped the flood in the battle and tracked the survivors. It turns out there's only one survivor, and that's Hult from the Uigan tribe. Eldaco rescues them and brings them back to Cold Hope, tending to their wounds. And Forlo almost dies. Then Minotaurs suddenly burst through the doors in order to capture Forlo on charge of desertion. This is really just a ploy by the now Emperor Raycaz, who hates Forlo desperately and wants him to die, and wanted him to die in the battle. And now that he didn't die and he survived, he wants to execute him for leaving the battle. Now, the 4th Legion Minotaurs warriors don't want to hear any of the rationale from Forlo, and so they just decide to attack them. The group fights off the Minotaurs as they run up to the master bedroom, which has the strongest door and lock. Shadara casts Featherfall as the Minotaurs start cutting through the door, all out of The Shining. Here's Johnny. Only she and Eldaco end up jumping out. Hult and Forlo are apparently so distrustful of magic that they don't believe it would work on them, or they're afraid of heights and they don't want to jump out, or a combination thereof. In either case, they get caught. So they're captured and taken back to the capital. Shadar and Eldaco travel to Armagh Nesti, which is the first place that pre-Sylvanesty elves, a fleet of them sailed trying to find some sort of new homeland, and they were blown off track by a storm, and they ended up landing in Taladas, and that's how elves got to Taladas. Anyway, they are like the closest thing to Sylvanesty. And their home is called Armagh Nesti. So the Sylvanesty, or the Sylvanay as they referred to them, homeland that was decimated by the Black Dragon and the Faceless Ones, in order to ask her brother for help in retrieving Forlo, Hult, and the statue. They arrive to see that Armagh Nesti is overrun by the Shadow Kender, and they run for their lives from hundreds of them. It turns out only 60 of the elves exist anymore. They're all scattered and dispirited from the invasion. Shadara and Eldaco convince them to travel to the Kender home, the Valley of Merrick, in order to stop the Kender from being turned into these sort of shadow abominations, and then destroy the statue if it just happens to be there. Then we cut over to Forlo. Forlo is presented to Raycaz, the new emperor, in a mock trial and chooses combat over sentencing. He and Hult have to face giant insects, I think they're like Horax or something like that, in the arena. They're nearly defeated, but Hult rips the... So Hult is basically a plainsman. He's like Riverwind, for example. And he just like rips the head off of this Horax in like the most badass way that could ever have been described. I was just like cheering the whole time, just shouting for... And I always thought Hult was a badass warrior, barbarian warrior. Everyone refers to the Uigans as barbarians. And so I always just assumed he was just like this crazy, monstrous warrior. But he never really did anything until this moment. And these insects aren't small. They're massive. Anyway, it got me all excited. So he actually ends up losing some of his fingers from trying to rescue Forlo because one of them had its teeth or its pinchers or whatever around Forlo's leg. I mean, he was wearing armor, but it was like going through the armor. And so Holt got in there, was like trying to pry it apart and stuff. Ended up snapping shut, losing a couple fingers, but saved Forlo's leg. Just as the elves drop their spell and just start appearing all over the arena. So Shadara convinced the elves of Armagh Nesty to join her in liberating Forlo and Holt. They went in as an illusion looking like Minotaurs, went to the huge vast arena, and then as soon as they saw that they were about to die from these damn Horax, they unveiled themselves a la the Jedi in episode 2 of Star Wars, Attack of the Clones, and just like decimate every one of these Minotaurs. I mean, the Minotaur guards, they get killed first, but the people who would then defend the guards, or their emperor, because he's here obviously wanting to watch Forlo die, they don't know who's Minotaur or who's elf looking like a Minotaur waiting to come out of the illusion. And so they're completely thrown off their heels, which is such a great moment. And just when they when they showed up, I literally shouted out loud because it was just written so well and exciting. And you literally were led to believe that Holt and Forlo were screwed. Like, I forgot. I haven't read this since, I don't know, 15 years or whenever it first came out. So I totally forgot about this scene, and it was really exciting. It was awesome. Anyway, led by Shadara, her brother and his troops end up capturing the Emperor, and Forlo ends up murdering the dude. They escape through the rift that the earthquake opened and flee over the sea. The Minotaurs give chase, and after a few days, they lose the Minotaurs over sea, sailing their ship. They head directly for Panak. Odd that they didn't head directly for Merrick, as previously stated, but they're told that an ancient silver dragon lives in that area who can actually identify the scale of the dragon that took Forlo's wife. So they found this gigantic black scale of a dragon in his keep that he was going to use. It's just weird. Like, at this point in the book, there's two places that they could be going. Merrick to stop the Kender, which is how Shadara drew out all of the Armagh Nesty elves, or to go talk to this dragon, which no one else seems to have any reason to go do. Like, if they already know that the Kender are in Merrick, there's no reason to go talk to a dragon, because the hooded ones who were riding, or the faceless ones who were riding the damn dragon they're hunting, are the ones turning the Kender over. So why not just go? Seemed weird. Anyway, Holt is given a magical necklace that allows him to speak and understand any language that he happens to be nearby. This actually serves in 2 points. The first one is that none of them could ever speak each other's languages. The Uigan didn't speak the common tongue of the Minotaur League. Forlo only spoke the Minotaur League. Oh my gosh, what is his damn name? Eldaco could speak a version of Elvish that Shadara could understand, and Shadara is the only one that could translate for everyone. So it was this weird game of, what did he say? And then she translates. He's like, okay, well then tell him this. And then, just sort of this weird telephone thing. Anyway, the Armagh Nesty elves leave to retake their homeland from the Shadow Kender invasion, and Holt, Eldaco, Shadara, and Forlo travel to Panak for the dragon. They're met by by Angasuk, a native to these frozen plains, and they travel through the terrain. I thought Holt was the character that had the nightmare that they sort of recount in this scene, but they later say that it was actually Eldaco, not Holt, which really confused me, so I didn't know whether I misunderstood it or whether there was an editing error. And in any case, I didn't want to go back and look it up again, so I just sort of rolled with it. Either I misremembered it, or they, it was a huge typo. Anyway, he takes, so basically they're in these frozen tundra wastes, and, in my head, I'm thinking like the ice folk in southern Krynn. But this is, of course, the northern reaches of Taladas, so it's the northern pole rather than the southern that they're nearby. And so he starts leading them to his village. It turns out they were sort of prophesied to come. Anyway, on the way there, they see these statues. And so, as El Daco is remembering, they traveled these barren wastes before because they don't live too far southeast of them or southwest of them. And they sort of were this message of impending doom, right? So they saw these weird statues, and then suddenly they started seeing creatures, like almost like shadow wights, not like the Kender that are fighting them, but like these undead wights that just sort of started appearing. And then this blizzard kicked in, and all they heard were screams and their blood, but then the screams would gurgle and stop really quickly. You could tell people were being murdered everywhere. And it was this crazy white-out horror scene that he happened to be the only one that survived. So as soon as he sees it, he is hitting PTSD like nothing else. And he's having a hard time sort of dealing with the fear, the terror that is striking him. What's great about this book, I mean, one of the many things that's great about this trilogy, really, is that Chris does such a wonderful job of explaining the nuances of a character's background and how it informs the current situations they find themselves in. It makes it really engaging and exciting and relatable in a, suspension of disbelief kind of way. It's really, really cool. Anyway, these statues are called the Ningasuk, idols that they also refer to as the patient folk in the native tongue, which are erected in order to keep away the undead wights, though it doesn't always work. Holt or El Daco, whichever one it is terrified, reliving his escape from these lands in the past, and the party is attacked, but then saved by the village elder, this sorcerer. So this guy, this reminded me of Avatar, The Last Airbender, if you guys ever watched that anime series, which is great if you haven't. He walks out like naked, except for a loincloth, this super old, wrinkly raisin of a man. He walks out in this huge blizzard while monsters are picking off his tribe men, and he just casts this crazy spell, and the winds die down and the creatures run away, and he just saves them in the middle of a blizzard wearing nothing. Like, it's just tough. That's badass. All right. So they end up entering his hut and watch a ceremony where the elder ends up using something called blood magic to commune with his ancestors. This is where I start to have a little bit of problem with the storytelling here. There are certain rules in Dragonlance that drive continuity and expectation, that make it Dragonlance. The idea that a sorcerer can only use spells from one of the moons, the gods. This is after the Fifth Age, and so the way I'm sort of reconciling this blood magic is actually wild sorcery and not like god magic. But then we have the character Shadara, who uses all of the moon's power. She's not, like a renegade would. So, in Taladas, they don't have the Orders of High Sorcery, and so there's that excuse for it. But it is so different the way they describe it that, there's some parts of it that during the waxing and waning of the moons or the Night of the Eye, they get the benefit as if they did worship individual gods, but they're not bound by only being able to worship certain gods, So it's sort of like this free-for-all. It kind of makes me think of the way that 5th edition is going to be approaching it, which could be a good thing. I don't know. Anyway, this guy tells them where to travel for the dragon, who is named Ukamiak, and he swears that they must kill this ancient worm after asking it for its help, because it used to hunt these plains people, these ice barbarians in ages past. And Forlo, who only wants to save his wife, agrees to it without even thinking about it. And then they have this great conversation on the way to the mountain range. He's like, why did you agree to that? That's a dragon. We've never faced a full-blown... What's the biggest dragon you ever fought? And Forlo's like, well, some wormlings. They right out of the hatches and we barely survived. Like, yeah, this is an ancient dragon that you agreed to kill. What are we going to do? And so, he starts realizing, he's like, wow, I made a really bad choice here. And we're starting to see this group dynamic form between these 4 people. And not only they're having a really great banter back and forth. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's sarcastic. It's really enjoyable to sort of experience the dynamics of this group. But also we're seeing this group change from the people that they were before all of this started to the people that they are now. We saw that massively with Holt in the first novel, but now we're seeing it with Eldako, Shadara, and Forlo, and it's really coming through because they're having these moments of clarity where they're seeing themselves change while they're doing it, but they're not changing from the... Does that make sense? Change from the change? Anyway. It takes days on the snow sled in order to get to the mountains, and they're told that the mountains are protected by these snow ogres. Well, since Holt has the necklace, he can then communicate with the snow ogres, and it turns out that these snow ogres are not aggressive. They're just protecting the dragon. The dragon's really, really old. And so they enter Ukamiak's lair and find that he's actually near death. Their coming was actually foretold, and they present the scale to the dragon. The dragon uses his magic in order to identify that the scale belongs to Sasheshkul, or Gloomwing. He lives in the boiling sea in the valleys of Merak, where the Kender are from. So, if they just went to Merak, they would have skimmed past this whole thing and it wouldn't have mattered. I'm starting to think the only reason why this entire sort of left turn happened in the book was because they wanted to fill the book out a little bit more. It was enjoyable. It was a great read, but it literally meant nothing to the story. They already knew where they had to go, which was weird. But okay, it's a flaw. So they could have skipped this entire experience. Nothing would have changed. I wonder if they put it in after this, thicken up the book. The dragon finally dies, and the ogres come forward and start mourning its passing. And every elf starts shedding their tears because, of course, it's an ancient life form that's dying, and elves revere life. But everyone is filled with sorrow. You know, they came in here thinking they had to try to figure some crazy way of killing this dragon. And then they realized that the dragon actually has been waiting for hundreds of years in order to fulfill this weird prophecy, which again is kind of strange when you reflect on what's happened in a few hundred years. You know, we had the cataclysm, and then we had the gods leave, and then we had we had chaos come in and all the gods leave, and then we had this huge return of the gods and magic. So in the past just 100 years, tons of shit has happened and all the gods have left. Do the legends still hold true if all of the gods are sort of just abandoning, they just aren't around? And then if a legend is true when the gods were there and then the gods leave, does that not change the river of time? I mean, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here too far, but I just want to sort of explore this for a moment. With the War of the Souls, the whole point was that there was a shift in the river of time, a branch that went off, which ended up being the new timeline. So then that means every prophecy that happened before that moment went that direction, not that direction, right? It's a weird thing to think about, but why would this dragon be waiting for a prophecy that cannot be fulfilled anymore? And then it gets fulfilled. So then am I just waxing for no reason? All right. So they arrive at the Shadow Kender. They arrive after the Shadow Kender. They arrive back at the Snow Barbarian village. And the Shadow Kender have slaughtered the entire village. Engasuk freaks out, rightfully so. After burying the dead and watching the polar flares streak across the sky, he takes them to their ship. And then everyone starts to have this sort of back and forth does everyone need to be here? We're leading death wherever we go. These Shadow Kender monstrosities are following us and killing everything in our wake. If you don't want to be here, understandably, if you don't have a skin in this fight, then go home. They're telling Odako to go home. They're telling Holt to go home. Holt has no home. It was decimated by these very people they're chasing. So he's like, look, you're not getting rid of me. I'm here to the end, and I'm going to murder those faceless ones that not only betrayed Chovak Boila, his sort of tribal leader, into doing the crazy things that he did, but they're literally the reason that his entire tribe doesn't exist anymore. And I'm not talking about a tribe of 50 people. I'm talking tens of thousands of tribesmen that went to war with them. All dead. because of these faceless ones. And then you've got Eldako, who could go to the Dreaming Green where he lives, where these sort of wilder elves live, but he's sworn an oath to go to the end and fight these creatures that betrayed, his people. And so he's just like, we've built a friendship, and I'm going to continue on with you. And of course, Forlo wants to go to get his wife, and the Shadara wants to go to get the statue. So everyone confirms that, yes, we are still all in it, even though death is following us everywhere. Let's go to Merrick Valley. So we're taken to Neron, where Essana is being held. Her pregnancy is going at a furious rate. Between the yaggol keeping tabs on our mind and her nightmares about her son being Maladar, she is tormented. The faceless ones who watched over her finally reveal a secret, that he's working against the other faceless ones and is actually planning on rescuing her. So Essana feels this relief flood her as they wait for the right time. The master of the faceless doesn't actually trust the caretaker and knows that he's a spy. When they finally make the move to escape, they end up being caught. Essana now gets bound and chained into the room, and the traitor is flayed as they remove pieces of his body, just keeping him alive so he can be tortured. This is a very Hellraiser scene, and it's just I love that stuff so much. And it sucks because it describes it so well that you're actually kind of grossed out by what she's looking at, and she's retching and being grossed out by it, rightfully so. And this guy's just tortured. Like, he's just first of all, they had to remove their bottom jaw and like tear up their face and eyelids and ears in order to be in this weird cult. They completely disfigured their bodies so that they're more monstrous, like Maladar used to be. Pre-Cataclysm time, like Age of Dreams era. And it's just, you can still be tormented. Even after all of that, they still find new ways to torture you. And it's disgusting, and it's awesome if you like horror. It actually reminded me a lot of The Scarlet Gospels by Clive Barker, which is the sequel to The Hellbound Heart, which is what the first Hellraiser film is based on by Clive Barker, where we know him as Pinhead, but he's called the Hell Priest, goes into hell, and he actually ends up, I don't want to spoil that story. But anyway, he gets his body more and more mutilated, and he was already mutilated. So you get this sort of double dipping of torture, and we're seeing it here. Okay, so the companions all travel by boat to the Valley of Merrick, where they begin to climb mountains and sleep in a cave, only to be woken by a rebel band of Kender. These Kender fled the invasion of the Faceless One called the Teacher, who has corrupted Chovuk Boila and is turning the Kender into shadow monsters. The Shadow Kender actually hunt this group, who is actually trying to free their captive brothers and sisters. The Kender were friends with Gloomwing, the Black Dragon, before the Faceless Ones came, and as soon as they did, Gloomwing turned on them and left. Now, the Kender take the companions to the valley and show them, while Neron is high in the sky, Neron is their name for the Black Moon, the Teacher actively on top of a ziggurat, turning Kender into these shadow beasts. And just the descriptions are so great. So you can, in the thing here, you get this little angle of the ziggurat going up. It's this primitive pyramid. And this faceless one, this, hideously disfigured abomination of a wizard sorcerer is on top, just sacrificing these poor freaking Kender, turning into these mindless, murderous beings. It's actually kind of devastating when you think about it. And just imagining them, they cast invisibility on everyone, and they get in a boat and they sail across a lake to get to the base of the ziggurat. And there's a sea of these Kender abominations just waiting. And so they have to use that other rebel Kender group as sort of bait to pull the attention of all of those shadow whites so that they can then try to charge up that ziggurat and kill this not kill, but capture this faceless one. See, and I just start riffing and I lose my place. Okay, so the Kender, they made a plan to attack, glide invisibly across the lake to the ziggurats, and attack the teachers. The Kender distracts the sea of Shadow Kender. The hooded one fights back, but is ultimately overwhelmed. They each fight the urge to murder him, and after torturing him for information, realize just how far they've fallen in the search for Maladar and Essana. They were good people in their own right, and now they are revenge-fueled murderers. They end up killing the Faceless One and learn that Gloomwing, the Black Dragon, is in Neron. They sail to the area only to have a vision, which actually happens, of Essana finally giving birth to her very large son, who is 2 months late. Women, you should understand the horrific nature of that. And then they haven't been able to put Maladar into the sun yet, and so she is taken to her cell without her baby. Gloomwing ends up sending this weird mental message to Shadara and Forlo that it's too late and they'll never rescue Essana. Then they actually see the dragon flying toward them and attack their ship. This is a note where I really appreciated this battle with this dragon. Oftentimes, you find these ways of getting the characters out of fighting dragons. So whether it's in Pax Tharkaz, it's the ancient red dragon that ends up killing, I think it was Pyros, or earlier in this same book, the dragon was already dying, so they didn't have to kill it. There's ways of narratively changing it so you don't have to put characters who could never survive an adult dragon attacking them in a situation where they come out as victors. In this particular case, they did not do that. It was crazy. So it's literally a dragon attacking a bunch of helpless, mortals on a boat. Like, what are you going to do? You jump off the damn boat to save yourself. So everyone jumps overboard. Shadara ends up casting water breathing on herself and goes after Forlo, who, in armor, is drowning. Which is, yeah, of course. But no one else does that. Like, they always have these stupid rules and tricks and stuff to get them out of the danger. There's actual consequences in this trilogy, and it's beautiful. So the dragon makes multiple passes in order to destroy the ship completely, and then starts picking survivors out of the water. As he's approaching Shadara and Forlo, as she's trying to drag Forlo out of the water, still unconscious, she thinks he's like drowned, Eldako, who is a supreme badass of a character, attacks the dragon with his bow, wounding it right in the wing joint, turning its attention to him, and holds it off as the native elves, who are now appearing all around them, and they were actually being caught by the yaggol and the hooded one, or the faceless ones, and being sacrificed to Maladar, but they've lived in this area for generations. They came out waiting for an opportunity to attack this damn dragon. Eldako stands off against Gloomwing, much like Sturm Brightblade did at the High Claris Tower, and ends up getting covered in the acid breath weapon as the Chaasi elves, which are these sort of primitive wilder elves that they run into, all attack at once, and that brings down Gloomwing. It was at this moment that Shadara knew that she loved Eldako and ran looking for him. They were unable to locate his body, and they ended up brought to the Chaasi camp, where the female elder, Yushan, welcomes them and speaks of a prophecy that Four came to liberate them. But without Eldako, they cannot win the fight. So she ends up scrying for him in this little basin, and finds that he is actually taken by the yaggol. They now have to rescue Eldako, Essana, and destroy the statue before Maladar is transformed into Forlo's son. And we know that Forlo's son is already born, so they don't have much time. They discover that the yaggol holding Eldako, or they discover where they are, and they end up rescuing him, reunited but horrifyingly scarred, and at a fraction of his strength, because he took a full blast of acid on him. He's missing an eye, which melted away. The other one's clouded over. His ears and half of his body is completely scarred up. Think Freddy Krueger here. And he can't move. Like, he's messed up. Again, wonderful seeing consequences in fantasy. He knows his days are numbered. Everyone knows they are too. So Shadara, who is incredibly in love with him at this point, is completely startled by his appearance, and he sees that in her. Think about how terrible that would be. You've loved her, you've felt this way about her, for months that they've been traveling at this point. And she finally sees it reflected in her eyes, and all she can do is be repulsed by you because of the state of your body, because you were just attacked by a black dragon's acid breath. Like, it's just so good. Oh my gosh. Not good as in happy, but good as in great storytelling. They make plans to travel to the ancient temple and rescue Essana. Essana is forced to watch as her son rapidly grows through magic and will be just over 20 with the mind of a child, controlled by the remaining faceless ones and yaggol by the time that the moon is full. And they're waiting for the moon to be full in order to transfer Maladar into him. Maladar will have the final ritual where their son kills his mother and enters the son's body. She is tormented, she's weak, she's stuck between pain in life and pain in her nightmare dreams. The group leaves with the Chasi in the long trek to the temple and come across native monsters with yaggol. They defeat them with the Chasi charms that prevent the yaggol from getting into their minds. They move on to the temple where there's an army of yaggol waiting for them there as well. They eventually break through only to be faced with the faceless ones. They barely fight their way up to the temple when Hult is paralyzed with Forlo. Shadara is stuck with a magical web, but as a final act, Eldako hits one of the faceless with an arrow through his eye and charges, sacrificing himself to destroy the last faceless one by running off the edge of the massive temple with him in his arms, killing them both. Forlo rages against the magic as his son nears killing his wife, but he leaps over her body, which is lying prone on a paralyzed, ends up threatening him to stay laying there, he's going to kill him, and Shadara looks after Forlo to see if he's alive. Maladar's statue explodes, and for a moment, they think they won. And you gotta just think, how good would that feel? And then to have it just ripped away moments later. Maladar entered Forlo's body and then stands up. He gives this final monologue and vanishes in flames. Oh, am I getting a streaming error? Let me know if you guys are seeing stuttering or something. It should be working, but I don't know. Maladar enters Forlo's body. He sort of disappears in flames. He appears next to the burning sea and is met by the god Hith. He ends up sending him into the lava fields at the center of Taladas, where another mountain hit, just as the mountain hit Istar. And they sort of discuss their plans on how they're going to take over Taladas. Hult and Shadara and the remaining Chasi bury Eldako and mourn for Forlo, though Essana refuses to believe that he's actually dead. Her son, who is now named Azar after the keeper, the faceless one who was trying to help Essana, tried to escape. He's now in his right mind and actually feels terrible about all of this, which, yeah, no kidding. He tells the rest that they need to help find the Rainward Isles, which is where Azar was supposed to be taking her, because he had set up a way to defeat the Hooded Ones in Maladar with some people there. So the Rainward Isles, for those of you who aren't familiar with Taladas, when the mountain hit Taladas and Istar at the same time, it broke this ancient a kingdom that was greater than Istar was in size and power. And there's a fraction of that ancient kingdom that still exists in the Rainward Isles. So this was an emotional roller coaster of a book. I've completely forgot that the son was actually born in the book and speed aged. The horror of living with yaggol is much like a Lovecraft story, and it's great! Once again, Chris Pierson brought adventure, new exciting cultures and environments to the forefront, and I was emotional and excited the whole time. I can't wait to start the final book in this trilogy. If you enjoy DragonLance Taladas, you must read this book. It's phenomenal. All right. It does have faults, as I mentioned. Some narrative bits that don't really make sense. The fact that you feel like you're constantly speeding through, in order to, cut down on time travel, because they're on a boat for weeks in order to get to some of these locations. It's just, they keep jumping through time, and every time it gets back to Essana, you don't know how far along she is. She doesn't really know how far along she is. And so then suddenly she's like 2 months overdue, and you're like, wait, how does that math add up? That she's 2 months overdue, yet the other people haven't found her yet. What the hell are they doing in the forest? Like, it doesn't make sense that it would take that long, but when you look at the vast scales, you know, and distance and everything, like, of course, they're traveling through a jungle. That takes infinitely longer than walking down a well-paved yellow brick road. So, yeah, I don't know. The time in this is very, very strange. You just sort of have to keep up on it. And then the locations. You tell me a location in Ansalon, and in my head, I can be like, okay, well, that's right here. You know, I know where it is. You tell me a location in Taladas, and I'm just like, where? It's where, huh? But if they're traveling west, why would they need to go west in order to get to north? And it takes, you got to do the math, you know? It's not easy. So, I don't know. It's nice that they have a little map at the very front, and they got a glossary at the very back of the book to explain all of the native languages. And they throw in some, you know, sort of swear words, which is awesome. Like through like different cultures' swear words, which is super fun. I always love that. Okay. So that being said, I had a great time. Philip, thanks for joining live. How you doing? Arrakis, good to see you. I appreciate you tuning in. Let's see. Chronologically, when does this tale take place? This is after the War of the Souls. So the first cataclysm hit, the Summer of Chaos and the second cataclysm hit, the gods left, then they came back after the War of Souls. So all the gods are returned. Right now, they're all vying for power. So I would think that this happens concurrently, as far as timeline goes, with the Dark Disciple trilogy. Because we get this moment of Hithkel, talking with Maladar at the very end, saying, look, we've lost one god, the Queen of Darkness died. The valiant warrior god ended up, you know, abandoning his powers, and all the other gods are vying for control of Ansalon. I'm taking Taladas. And it's just like and then he tells Maladar, who is like the ultimate bad guy that you've never heard of. It's like if Fistendantilus and Galen Dracos had wonderful, wonderful love and had this ridiculous evil sorcerer demon child. That is Maladar. And, you know, he's like incredibly more powerful than anything that has ever, you know, he's not even afraid of a god. As Hith walks up to him, Hith bows his head. So you're just like, what the hell is going on here? This guy is crazy powerful. So this is after all the gods have returned and they're vying for power and control in the wake of Takhisis' death, which makes it a really ripe time as far as Dragonlance is concerned. You have the traditional magic, you have primal sorcery, you have all of the gods if you want to go down the god route. You can completely ignore them if you want to completely ignore them. You can literally travel anywhere throughout all of Ansalon or all of Taladas. And, you know, there's going to be rows of temples to different gods on the same street. It's in Solace, for example. Like, this is just a ripe time to explore Krynn. And there are only, you know, I don't know, like 5 trilogies or something like that that were written at this period. And they all deal with like little minutia of areas like goblins or, you know, the ogres or, you know, the elven nation trying to survive. It's just a really great time for Dragonlance, in my opinion, because we have all the great stuff that came before the 5th Age and then all the stuff that match with the game systems after the 5th Age. You know, a lot of Dragonlance, as far as like the story goes, just progresses in order to meet the game system that is current. You know, 2nd edition changed Dragonlance with Time of the Dragon box set and the Heroes of the Lance box set. When Saga game system came along, it completely changed into the 5th Age in order to match that game system. And then when 3.5 for D&D was out, they went right back to the War of the Souls and they tried to explain out some of these new creatures in this new world and new era. And now that 5th Age is out, you know, they're going back to War of the Lance era, but I think the real money would be picking up right where they left off, because all of the 5th edition game tropes and stereotypes and characters and roles and feats and everything fit perfectly in a post-War of Soul Dragonlance era. But who knows? Anyway, you wouldn't want to be on a ship with a dragon about. No, I would not either. There's that great painting on the front of Otherlands supplement of the sea dragon coming up and attacking that ship. it inspired so many different D&D adventures with me and my friends. But it's terrifying. I mean, first of all, even if you're not on the ship, if you're on the ground, dragons fly. Heroes don't fly. So you can't really do anything. Their movement's so fast, they can be out of range of all of your ranged weapons, come in, strafe you with a few claws and maybe even a tail bite and a physical mouth bite and a breath weapon, and then fly, finish their movement, and they're still in the air before you can hit them. You're screwed. Dragons are so badass. It's crazy. That's why you need stuff like dragon lances and dragon orbs to try to level the playing field a little bit. Or, a fleet of griffins. Get on back of those. All right, let's see. Yeah, D&D made different breath weapons for different dragons. Those are great. You haven't read this one. Oh, man, Anthony. It's a great one. And the thing is, I'm truncating these stories. There's so much more that happens. And then, you get the, in the head dialogue and personal experience and stuff. It's so great. It's really worth a read through. This is After the War of Souls. Let's see. Have you read the book about Chrysanth? I have not. Sorry, you're trying to go through your mind back 15 years ago. Yeah. Let's see. You're feeling like you missed a few books. You skipped a bit, but you're working now. Okay. Well, I'm glad that this stream corrected itself. Let's see. You can still hear and see me, though you did get wonky for a second. All right. I'm scaring the shit out of you. You become super interested in Taladas and are getting ready to finish rebuilding your 386 IBM PC so you can replay Champions, Dark Queen, and Krynn. That is very retro of you. But Anthony, you don't have to do that because you either on GOG.com or Steam, you can get those games that work on modern computer systems. So, it's cool if you want to go back and relive them on those systems, but you don't have to. Taladas has to have continental PTSD. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, for real. They're like, what are you guys doing down there? Honestly, we're just trying to freaking live up here. Jeez. You haven't read Dark Disciple? I've done these on all the Dark Disciple ones. The first one's amazing. The second one's okay. And the last one kind of, in my opinion, it kind of shits the bed in the end. But you can look up that review if you're interested. Where's the Taladas in relationship to Ansalon? So Taladas is northeast of Ansalon. I don't know if this is reversed as I'm showing you my hand movement. You haven't played second edition? That was a great edition to play in, man. I had such a good time with that edition. Let's see. It's called Blackwing. Chrysanth is a black dragon. Oh, yeah. I do want to read that, actually. I want to read that a lot. That whole villains series I want to read. I really want to read about Ericus, of course, but also Verminard. I think he didn't get the props that he deserves as a character. You haven't read this series in like 20 years? Yeah. Yeah, it has been that long. Okay. The call outs of this story so far for me are the yaggol. I just love Cthulhu mythos. I love Lovecraft as a writer. I want Necronomicon to be real so badly. It would be so terrifying and awesome. I just love that idea of these, ancient beings who don't care about humanity that will just come in and destroy you if you happen to waken them. It's just like, I love it. They're not quite gods. They're not quite demons. They're just other entities that are so much greater than anything we can aspire to that the best you can do is worship them so they don't kill you. It's kind of cool. You get a lot of horror in this, from the perspective of not only Essana dealing with the horror of pregnancy, a la Rosemary's Baby, which is beautiful. It's such an apt comparison too. So you get this personal horror, body horror, of seeing the faceless ones, interacting with them on the regular, and the yaggol creeping into your brain and literally controlling you like a rag doll or something. But then you get the fear as a father and husband in Forlo, not knowing if his wife is alive, if his child is going to be born, and the fact that she doesn't know if he's around. There's a sick desperation that sort of overtakes him, and he's willing to literally go to any lengths. You know, he's like a general in the Minotaur League, or he was before he killed the Emperor, and so he's already brutal by nature, you know, tactical. But you see him degenerating throughout the course of this story, which is just great. There's just so much to really love about this trilogy that shines a new light on Dragonlance. Not as dramatic as Spelljammer did, but in a very, very character-driven, interesting way. So anyway, I highly recommend it. And that is it for my review of Trail of the Black Wyrm by Chris Pierson. What do you think of the cultures of Taladas? Have you ever played a campaign there? You can always leave me a message at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. For those of you joining live in the chat, I freaking love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in live. It makes this so much more fun for me. And I would like to take a moment and remind you, if you're not already, to subscribe to this YouTube channel. It helps me out, but it also helps other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. And if you happen to like the video, click the like button. Don't be a stinky gully dwarf, as mentioned earlier. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga. I thank you for joining me in that celebration. My name is Adam. This is DragonLance Saga, and until next time, Slán Javar.